Here for the regular meeting of the West Basin Engineering Operations Committee and a special meeting of the Board of Directors. If we can have Mr. General Manager.
Absolutely. We'll start with Director Williams.
Here.
Director Deere. Director Gray. Director Houston. And Chair Alvarez.
Here.
Okay, so it appears we have a quorum for the committee, but not for the special board meeting.
Okay, so next item up is public comment. Is there any comments? Public member?
I think we have no comments here in the room, but I'll check on the online platform. And if anyone interested in making a public comment can raise their hand. Currently, I see no hands raised on the platform itself. And so I will interpret that as no public comments for today, Chair.
Okay, so next item up is the action calendar. And so on the action calendar, the first item is the procurement of social costs for the SVO solids handling system. Manager, if you want to introduce that.
Absolutely. And you may recall in the previous E&O committee, we presented the overall solids handling project and various aspects of recommendations, alternatives, things of that nature. But we identified an early implementation that would help us reduce our operating costs. And this item is exactly that. And so we have John Gainer, our engineer here, ready to provide that report out and recommendation. So John, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and Director Williams. Today I'll be presenting a staff recommendation to procure filter cloths for our solids handling system. This is under CIP project 10059. The agenda item 5A begins on page 4 of your board packet. We'll be beginning today with attachment A, the presentation, which begins on packet page 7. So next slide, please. So if you'd like to turn to page 8, we'll begin today with some background on the project. As you may remember, I presented a project overview for the solids handling improvements project at the last E&O in October. That presentation contained detailed background of the project and the options available to us. But for today, I've just included a one-page recap. Our solids handling system is vital for West Basin's recycled water program. Without a solids handling system, our recycled water system would grind to a halt. The largest component of this solids handling system is the final stage, comprised of 2 plate and frame filter presses, or PFFPs. These presses compact all of the solid sludge produced at the Edwards Sea Litter water recycling facility into cakes, which are then deposited into trucks and taken away for use. Both of these presses and their associated systems were installed in 1995. And most of the major components are now in a poor or very poor condition. This poor condition has caused rapidly escalating maintenance, solids haulage, and chemical treatment costs. West Basin has conducted 3 studies into this issue, the first in 2018, the second in 2021, and the latest was completed this year in 2022. After evaluating these studies and assessing the current costs of running a system in poor condition, West Basin staff recommends proceeding with option B, refurbishment of the plate and frame filter presses. Next slide, please. Before we get to the action item though, before you today, I'd like to just take a moment to address some comments raised in the previous presentation. So 3 requests were made. The first was a request for further detail on the current actual costs of running the solids handling system. The second request was for additional background on how the costs were estimated from the option A, maintenance of the PFFPs, also known as the do nothing option. And the third request was for further information on how our maintenance contract functions. Regarding this first request, this slide here shows a chart of the actual costs of operating the solids handling system since 2013. The table to the right details costs over the last 3 financial years, rounded to the nearest $100,000. As you can see, we have experienced steep climbs in nearly all cost categories across the last few years. And as stated in my prior presentation, this is mainly due to the poor condition of the system, leading to increased maintenance, operator presence, and haulage. Over the last couple of years, the solids handling system has cost approximately $5 million to operate and maintain. And as stated in the previous presentation, our calculations show that refurbishment of the plate and frame filter presses can significantly reduce this to around $2.8 million per year. generating a break-even period of approximately 7 years, despite the $15.3 million capital investment required for the refurbishment. Next slide, please. The second request from the last DNO was for a more detailed breakdown of these do-nothing cost estimations, the option A cost estimations. So here I've taken the same table from the previous slide and added in a column with the cost estimations used on that option. As you can see in the table, the estimated costs closely track the costs from previous years, with 3 notable exceptions: operator labour, annual parts, and quantified risks. Operator labour was estimated to be slightly lower than actual cost from previous years. This is due to the fact that the actual costs shown here in the last 3 fiscal years include a small amount of labour on other elements of the solids handling system, so the gravity belt thickeners and clarifiers. As for the purposes of this, we're only discussing the plate and frame filter presses. The estimated labour cost was estimated to be slightly lower. The second and third deviations, so that's the annual parts and quantified risks, are linked. If you remember from the previous presentation, quantified risks include estimated costs for replacing components, plates, and associated downtime. Therefore, the annual parts estimate needs to be reduced as some of these costs are covered in the quantified risk category. Overall, we estimated the annual O&M cost of the do-nothing period to be $5.8 million moving forwards. As you can see, this is a close approximation to the actual cost last year of $5 million. The slight difference here can be explained with the quantification of risks, such as component failure and downtimes that we expect to occur more frequently as we continue to operate a system that is in a poor condition. Regarding the third and final request about the maintenance contract, we manage our operations and maintenance contracts on a time and material basis. Contract operators charge their time to activity codes and inform us of equipment purchases they need to make for the upkeep of our systems. The operator labour and annual parts categories shown in this table reflect the costs charged to both the solids handling activity codes and equipment codes respectively. I hope that answers the question. I was going to pause here for any questions, but I know we've got a full agenda, so if it's okay, I'll continue on for the rest of the presentation. Take questions at the end.
For right now, go ahead, unless Director Williams.
Okay, excellent. So next slide, please. So moving on to the action item. This slide depicts the overall project schedule. Last month we presented the project review, and today we're bringing the filter cloth procurement award forward for you. So the project review is in the top left there, and the filter cloth procurement award is in the red box. This is the first board action on this project, and it consists of the procurement of replacement filter cloths for the PFFPs. The actual procurement cost is $68,180. However, we have included a 10% shipping contingency of $6,818 to ensure we can manage any potential shipping cost changes. If this procurement is approved, the next item before the board will be the procurement of a contractor to install these cloths. Staff aims to bring this contract award for this work before the board in January of next year. That award is estimated to be approximately $75,000. Next slide, please. So on to the business case as to why staff recommends actually replacing these filter cloths. In the last financial year, we spent $1,719,826 on hauling away these solids cakes produced by our PFFPs and plate and frame filter presses. Now, this was on the previous contract where we were paying $66 per tonne. We're now moving on to a new contract that will be $87 per tonne. This contract was approved by the board back in May of this year. Therefore, even if our tonnage that we haul stays the same, we're facing a steep increase in costs. As you can see from this bar chart on the right, our annual hauling cost is anticipated to increase to $2,271,000 per year on the new contract. In July of this year, as part of the planning for the solids handling improvements projects, we conducted an inspection of the plate and frame filter presses alongside a representative of the original equipment manufacturer, so the manufacturer who made the presses back in 1995. As part of this inspection, the representative identified that not only were 2/3 of the filter cloths fitted to the presses in a poor condition, but that we were utilising filter cloths of inferior quality. According to this representative, such inferior quality cloths have flooded the US market in recent years, and many previously reputable vendors were switching to these cheaper cloths despite promising higher quality versions. This information about poor business practices within the industry was later corroborated by another public agency that has the same filter cloth requirements as West Basin. Upon receiving this information, West Basin staff reached out to the OEM for a recommended vendor and received the quote of $68,180 for the cloths, including shipping. It should be noted that this quote came in below the original staff estimate of $75,000. It has been estimated by the original equipment manufacturer that replacing our current filter cloths with higher quality varieties would increase press efficiency and therefore reduce our haul tonnage by up to 40%. As you can see from the red bar here on the bar chart, a 40% efficiency increase correlates to a new estimated annual cost of $1,362,000, which would save us approximately $909,000 per year. A reduction of this magnitude would save the district an average of $76,000 per month in hauling costs. Due to both the significant immediate savings that could be achieved and the alleged uncertainty within the industry, it is staff's recommendation to proceed with the single source procurement of these high quality filter cloths from the OEM recommended vendor. It should be noted that while this is the first step of our solids handling improvements project, staff does recommend proceeding with this cloth replacement step, even if the board does not wish to proceed with the full project, simply due to the cost savings that are on next slide, please. So with that, I'll ask you to return to page 6 of your board packet for the recommendation. That the board authorize the general manager to enter into a procurement agreement, supplier Universal Filtration and Pumping for the procurement of 280 filter cloths and associated cloth caps at a quoted cost of $68,180 with a 10% shipping contingency of $6,818 for a total not to exceed amount of $74,998. And with that, I welcome any questions.
All right, John, thank you very much. Director Williams, if you have any questions?
I have no questions other than to the general manager. Is this a good deal for us?
I think it's a very good deal. The cost savings that's demonstrated by the analysis, the efficiency of producing a drier, solids cake from our solids handling process will help us realize that savings. It's a first step out of many steps. And what John didn't talk about is having a better solids handling process will help the overall handling of solids throughout our recycled water production process and improve water quality. It'll be one of the contributors towards improved water quality for our Title 22 process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. Back to your savings or cost/savings analysis. Basically, on this particular item, by replacing the filters, we're obviously going to reduce the amount of hauling that needs to be done. So the estimate is about $900,000. Is that consistent if you project this for over the next 5 years? And the follow-up question to that is, what is the life of the next replacement cycle for these filters?
Yes, so the filter cloths in a fully functioning system, the system is well maintained, you would need to replace roughly 10 to 20% of these filter cloths a year. In our current system, the OEM predicts that if we do not continue with the full refurbishment project, we would need to be replacing between 50 to 75% of the filter cloths per year in order to maintain that savings. And that is a cost that the impact that diminishes over time, because we'll end up with components failing and things like that would impact other costs. But yeah, to increase the efficiency.
Okay, so we need to replace 60%. Is that what you said, of the filters annually?
If we do not continue with the rest of the refurbishment, because there's knock-on effects of the poor conditions of other components. So if we decided to just do this item and not continue with the rest of the solids handling refurbishment, we'd need to do that. But we would experience diminishing returns, and there'll be other costs such as component failures.
So this purchase right now, that's for 100% replacement?
Yeah, 100%. That's 280.
So 60% would then be approximately, with some annual cost increases, would be about 60% of this cost. to just maintain the plant with maybe some additional maintenance for the
Yes,
5 years. If we
yes,
do
and that
nothing else.
that would maintain the density that we're trying to achieve. But as I say, we would experience diminishing returns. As the rest of the system.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I think that was consistent with more or less the direction that we provided last time, that let's just do what we have to do to maintain the plant without spending a lot of money. And it does seem like a good investment. I have one other question, and that's if you can address the financing. I know in the fiscal impact, it says that there's a $1.5 million included in the fiscal budget for 2023. But specifically in this case, we're spending $75,000. Where is that money coming from?
For that, in terms of funding,
There's a fund.
I believe the money, we have some agreed funding with the refineries. That was in my previous presentation.
The presentation does says the refinery, so the refinery's gonna write us a check for $75,000?
No, I'm not sure how refineries fund the agreement, but
Yeah, I can take that, John. Hi, Director Alvarez, Director Williams. The couple of the refineries pay fixed charges towards, monthly fixed charges towards some of our CIP projects based on some current agreements or addendums to agreements for the refineries. So, you know, and there are certain amounts, a few $1,000s a month. And those addendums have a list of projects, and those fixed charges go towards those projects. And this project is listed in those agreements. So if we don't do the projects for the term of those agreements, we would have to return that money back to the refineries. So the portion of this project, as John presented last ENO, the full refurbishment of the project is $15 million. This is the first step for the cloths. There's a refinery component towards that 15. And then the rest of it, because this is a facility, if we were to refurbish the entire thing, it would be a facility that will have a lifespan of 15, 20 years. Debt refinancing was assumed for such projects. For this particular component of the project, we could make the decision, because it's a lower cost, we could make the decision to pay for it through our reserves. The 75 for the cloth itself, and then the other 75 for construction. So that is an option for us to do.
So let me be more focused based on your reply. Will this be paid out of operating income?
If the cloth, it could be, if that's the desire of the board.
Well, this will be a capital replacement, right?
It could be paid off of, let me revise that, off of the reserves.
But I think your question is whether it would be an
Well,
O&M.
my question is it, if you're gonna be paid out of operating income is one way to, if we're getting all this income for whatever amount we're getting from the refineries, that would be operating income, and that would be used to pay for this. I don't consider this a capital expense. I would think that we ought to look at this as just a maintenance expense. Because it's gotta be done annually. We're gonna have to replace 60% of these annually. So I don't see that as a capital expense. I see this as more of a operating and maintenance expense. Therefore, I would think that it would be logical that it be paid for out of operating income. If it's gonna be done on an annual basis, which is what John Ruder stated.
The threshold for us, sometimes we say, was this an operating expense or a capital expense? You may recall from our capital budget, we have a line item there for certain type of asset replacements. So per our code, if an asset has a lifespan of 3 years or costs more than $10,000, then it could be considered a capital asset, therefore being funded through the capital program. In the state, we ask ourselves that question, is this cloth a capital asset? And the answer was yes. So we basically had the funding for this particular item through the capital asset replacement fund in our CIP.
I think I followed what you said. But it's not conclusive that it has to be a capital asset. And, it's something that you're gonna be replacing at least 60% of annually. So I have a harder time calling that a capital replacement. Usually capital tends to have a longer lifetime. I traditionally tend to think in terms of a capital asset, 10 to 20-year life cycles, as opposed to a 1 or 2 year life cycle. So I don't know, Director Williams, your thoughts on that?
I can't agree with you. And I thought that at this point, that maintenance costs we know where that is, how we're gonna handle that at this point. Well, we wouldn't be in a situation here where we're having to ask the question, how is it going to be funded? If it is a cost against the our fiscal impact, that we should know that now. We shouldn't be in a situation where we are trying to figure out if it is or is not. So
Well, I think what we're saying is that this project was budgeted under the CIP. And we're talking about the larger project that was presented in the previous committee. This is a first step of a larger project. I think the question that was asked was, what would be the replacement if we were only to do this one step? We don't recommend only doing this one step. If we were to complete the entire project, if the board approves that, then the lifespan, I think you said it would be a 20% replacement. I'm sorry, the
10 to 20% annual replacements.
of the filter cloth. Yeah, 10 to 20% compared to 60%. And so maybe this evaluation of whether it's O&M or capital would hinge on whether it's 60% replacement or 10 or 20% replacement. So, I mean, we can, consult with an accountant who can give us what the generally accepted accounting practices are for capital investments. But our budget classifies this project as a capital investment.
I think at least when I get the budget presentation, I don't see that detail of something like this. And I'll go back, even if it's 20% replacement as opposed to 60%, that means you're basically replacing it every 5 years. And that is a very short life to consider capital investment. So it should be paid, in my opinion, out of operating income. I don't know what Director Williams thinks, but that's what I think would be the right thing to do.
even so, we shouldn't be having this discussion now. It should have been part of your recommendation. So what,
Well, I mean, it was not a question for us. We consider this a capital investment.
that's your recommendation?
That is our recommendation.
And your recommendation is to pay for it as it is a capital project?
That is our recommendation. This is budgeted as a capital project. We certainly can confer with our financial, advisors and say, hey, we want to make sure, because a question came up on the board about whether this component of the project is eligible to be considered a CIP. We can do that, research and bring that back to the committee. And we can adjust our financing approach if the accountants say that, yeah, this would not be eligible for capital.
I think we ought to do that.
I'm sorry?
Okay, so we can confer with our accountants.
Is this a capital expenditure or is it a maintenance? We should know that.
Right.
For my cents. Definitely a maintenance type of activity. And some maintenance items are not cheap. And not that this is that expensive, this is a very reasonable to keep that plant operating over the next 5 years. So I would suggest that we move this item to the full board for approval. They can bring back additional information. But I would say for at least this time, that it should be paid for out of operating capital,
You mean operating expense?
operating income.
Okay, so we have the instruction to bring back additional information on the question of whether that
It is-
component is eligible to be covered under capital or not. So we'll do that. And if the accountants agree that this is not eligible, then we'll,
Well,
amend our-
we can do that, but I think that at least my recommendation would be that for this particular $75,000 investment, that it be taken out of the operating income.
Is that your recommendation going forward?
Yes, for the next board meeting, so we can get, because this is a worthwhile investment to make. You 75,000 will save you $900,000.
I could support that. I concur.
Okay, so just so that I understand, so the recommendation is to move it forward as an expense item, not a capital item.
Right, but when you bring it back, do the explanation of what is capital.
Okay, and then we might amend it at that point in time. Okay, very good. I think
It's not the
we're-
intent to amend it, it's intent to be, that the board be better informed.
Understood.
Before we leave the item, I want to go back to the fact that this is a $15 million CIP and that the Ed C. Little plant is an asset that we may or may not be owning in 5 years, and the continued investment in that asset needs to be done very cautiously. So you're showing that you're going to go out with a request for proposal in the beginning of the year. Before you go out to that with a request for proposal, I would like to see that request for proposal be brought back to the E&O committee. And what exactly are we going to be asking to be done at the plant?
You're really asking the general manager that question.
Yeah, I'm just generically asking.
Okay, let me make sure I understand the,
If you go to page 11 of the package,
with the
it
schedule.
shows that limited design RFP estimated at 1.3 million, January 2023. So, well, actually showing awards, I didn't see that. I thought it was gonna go out as an RFP. So you guys already issued an RFP. If you're gonna award it in January 2023.
We have not issued the RFP yet.
Okay, so before you issue that RFP, I think we ought to discuss what it is that we're proposing to hire, to commit to design. Because you're estimating that the design services are $1.3 million, so that's not inconsequential.
So you'd like to see the scope?
I'd like to see the scope, I'd like to see, and we may or may not need to do that given where we are with the Ed C. Little plan. And so general manager, you could bring that back. Whenever that, you want to have the discussion about that RFP, it should be scheduled before it goes out to the committee.
Before it goes out on to the committee. Got it.
Okay? All right. Anything else on that? So we're moving on. We have the agreement amendments for supply and delivery of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid. And general manager, if you want to handle that one?
Yes, and so we have Susanna Lee here, our senior operations engineer. And if it would please the committee, we can have her speak to both item B and item C, both dealing with chemical contracts. So we could flow right from one to the other. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So Susanna, please.
Thank you, Greg, and good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and William. So as Greg mentioned that we have two agenda items, items 5B and C related to chemical contract. As we are all aware that the chemical industry has been facing a lot of struggles with supply chain issues, and with the latest, the railroad strike that will potentially go on early December. And so what I'm here to present two item is to establish contracts for the remaining bulk chemical and for the rest of the fiscal year 22-23. The last time staff came to present to the board in regard to chemical contracts were in September for the chlor-alkali chemicals contracts, and which that the board directed staff to establish new contracts as we were continuously facing like requests from vendors for price adjustment. And so those three contracts will end in March 31st, 2023. So before the end of the fiscal year, I will be coming back to request for either extension for those three bids or going out for bids for those three chemicals again. So for the remaining of the 8 bulk chemicals that we had renewed back in April, the contracts are ending in December 15, 2023, which is coming up in a month. So those chemicals needs to new contracts. And before the staff actually went out to advertise new IFQs for those 5 chemical contracts, staff actually went to and extended invitations for chemical vendors, whether they have interest in extending the contracts with the current unit pricing for the end of till the end of fiscal year 2022-23. So 2 of the chemical vendors expressed interest and agreed to extend the contracts with the current unit pricing. That would be California Tool and Rolling Supply and Unifor USA for the supply and delivery of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid respectively. So for item 5B, that is for those 2 contracts, and that staff is recommending that the board authorize the GM to amend those 2 contracts at the unit pricing, the current unit pricing, and extend the contract for the remainder of fiscal year 22-23. And on the related note, for item 5C, that's for the remainder of the 3 bulk chemicals and the 1 mini bulk chemical contracts that are also expiring December 15, 2023. IFQ were sent out for those chemicals and on October 10, 2022. For those 4 chemical contracts, West Basin received 5 to 8 companies that expressed interest in participating and submit quotes for those chemicals. West Basin received between 1 to 3 quotes for each of the chemicals. The submitted quotes are summarized in attachment A and B on agenda 5C, which begins on page 17. So staff evaluated the quotes for each of those chemicals and identified the lowest quotes as shown in table 1 of the memo. So as shown in the table, and as expected, there is a significant increase in unit prices for those chemicals ranging from 4 to 36%. 36% increase being sodium hypochlorite is one of the chlor-alkali, but that's for the mini bulk contracts. There is one exception with hydrogen peroxide having a reduction in unit price. And the explanations that is because Brentech is actually the manufacturer for that chemical. So the current contract that we have for that chemical is Miles Chemical. They actually purchase the chemical from Brentech currently. So Miles Chemical actually did propose, and they actually notify staff that they will not be able to hold the pricing for 6 months, but only for 3 months only. So hydrogen peroxide is the only chemical that has a reduction, 8% reduction in unit pricing compared to the current contracts. So based on the forecast, budgeted sales for fiscal year 22-23. The operation O&M budget for these chemical, we estimated about $404,000 per month. And with the new unit price increase, this will bring the total average monthly cost for these four chemicals to approximately $498,000 per month. And the increase for the fiscal year 22-23 for the 6-month contract is estimated about $560,000. Based on the current budgeted sales. So with that, if the committee, I will be reading the recommendation for both memos at this point, and I'll take questions afterwards. So for item 5B, that is the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to amend current amendments with 2 chemical suppliers to extend the term of the agreements from December 16, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 for the supply and delivery of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid at the unit pricing listed below. Carbon dioxide, California Tools and Welding Supply to supply the delivery of carbon dioxide at 0.085 per pound, plus 8.0475 per pound of surcharge fee. For sulfuric acid, Unifor USA Inc. to supply and deliver sulfuric acid at $5 per ton for ECL and $450 per ton for Torrance and $365 per ton for JMM. And for the recommendation for item 5C, that the board authorize the general manager to award agreements with the following chemical suppliers for the second 6 months of fiscal year 2022-23 from December 16, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 for the supply and delivery of the following chemicals. Ferric chloride, Henkel Inc. to supply and delivery ferric chloride at $1,025 per dry ton. Hydrated lime, Ahoy's North America to supply and deliver hydrated lime at $388.84 per ton. Hydrogen peroxide, Brantech Pacific Inc. to supply and deliver hydrogen peroxide at $3.89 per gallon. And the mini bulk chemicals, Miles Chemical Company for the supply and delivery of air chloride at 60 cents per ton per pound and sodium hydroxide at 39 cents per pound. And finally, sodium hypochlorite at $3.58 per gallon. And in addition, staff requests that the board authorizes the general manager to adjust fiscal year 2022-23 West Basin chemical budget to $14,236,855, adjusting for escalating chemical industry costs. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Director Williams.
Thank you very much. Mr. General Manager, is there a better alternative?
I believe the staff had worked diligently with these chemical suppliers to get us the best prices available. Clearly, between the 2 items, B and C, a couple of the vendors were able to hold their prices firm, and so we're recommending to extend those. And then we were able to get the market pricing that's available to us now. We've seen the volatility over these chemicals and in the short period I've been here with the district, and we continue to see that. And so I think they've worked diligently to get the best prices that are available to us in the marketplace.
Based on that, I would support staff's recommendation.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, when sulfuric acid delivery at NC Little and at the Carson facility is $365 per ton. Why is it $450 per ton at Torrance? That's $85 per ton more.
That's based on the usage. So there's a significant less amount of usage there. And so they tend to go higher.
But are we buying off from this one provider? So why the differentiation? I understand you say that you use less, that, I'm sure that all three plants use different quantities. You know, but the amount used at Sea Little is different than the amount used at Carson, than the amount used at Torrance. Why are we paying more at one versus the other two?
Significantly less. And small volume, that's the reason they have given us. Historically.
I would assume, and I have not had my own conversation with the vendor, that you have a delivery quantity that's going to a specific location, regardless of what you're buying elsewhere. And so they're charging the rate based on that delivery.
Okay.
So if you could take a full truckload,
I-
that's one thing. If you're taking a partial truckload, then they're gonna charge you for that. Does that sound, Susanna, like that's the case?
Yeah, and the storage there is smaller, and so historically, if the delivery is, like you said, partial load versus full load, they will charge us significantly differently. And currently, to be honest, we are seeking alternative delivery method because of the Sophia Asset project is being held up. And that might be even smaller delivery.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand, but there's a reason.
There's a reason.
The other item has to do with the budget. We're authorizing an increase in the budget of $560,000. So the budget goes from currently $13,678,000 to $14,238,000 dollars. Where is that coming from?
Would you like that to come from cash reserves?
I would like that. I would like to know, and I think that we do need to be very conscientious about the budget. So we're authorizing an increase in the budget of $560,000. Where is that coming from?
I think in the last similar situation, we heard from the committee that if the preference is to have that delta funded through PAYGO, through cash reserves, not through debt financing. And so if we're not going to use commercial paper or some other financing instrument, then it has to come from cash reserves.
Okay. All right, with that clarification, I think that we need to move forward with that. So are you good with moving it forward with that?
Yes.
Okay, and it goes from cash reserves of whatever other cash we have.
Right. So cash reserves.
Thank you.
Don't take too much out of there. All right, it won't last forever.
Yeah,
All righty. Thank you for that, Director. Okay, so that, I'm sorry.
well, the next item is the agreement award for monitoring well package sampling services.
Okay, and we have our water quality and environmental compliance analyst, Jamie Burkhart, who's prepared to give the report and our recommendations. So please, Jamie.
Thank you, Greg. I'm going to say good evening, Chairman Alvarez and Director Williams. I'm here today to present item 5D. The action item is on page 22 of your packet. I'd like to start by giving you a little background information. The West Coast Basin Barrier Project establishes a hydraulic barrier to prevent seawater intrusion into the groundwater aquifers. This IPR project is regulated through the state's Title 22 recycled water regulations and in our current barrier permit. Regulations require us to monitor 11 different monitoring wells at 8 locations. The work is multifaceted. It involves pumping out water within these wells, usually 2 casings, to get accurate water quality results reflective of the aquifer versus the well itself. The flow cell is used at the surface to take water quality readings for measurements until they've stabilized, at which point the actual sampling can begin. Because there have been changes to the regulations for well discharges, West Basin now has to either haul away the purge water or use it on nearby vegetation. And the final component of this bundled project is traffic control. The triple nested well, which is the only one that's actually owned by West Basin, is on a busy street that requires a lane closure and the associated permits, equipment, and city notifications. Since the city's well discharge permit was amended in 2018, West Basin worked to find full-service sampling firms who could haul away the purge water and comply with the strict traffic control requirements. West Basin contracted this combined service with both WPI and Blaine Tech in the past. And the current contract with WPI will expire in January of 2023. An RFP was released to Marcel on September 27, 2022. Due to staff's work to increase participation from vendors, 7 companies opted to participate in the process. Ultimately, 2 submitted proposals by the deadline on October 13th. 3 people evaluated these proposals, including an outside evaluator from LA County Department of Public Works, who is our partner in the barrier project and owner of 8 of the 11 monitoring wells. A summary of the evaluation scores is provided in attachment C. A cost summary and copies of both of the companies' pricing is provided in attachment D. Both of the companies are capable of performing the full scope of work. After evaluating the 2 proposals for the project and considering the recent of staffing and trucking shortages, staff is recommending to split the contract in order to maintain flexibility with the sampling requirements. The overall score for the WPI proposal reflects careful attention to detail and a deep understanding of the full scope of the project. Blaine score also reflects competence and allows for issuance to sample for 3 of the monitoring wells. I'm now going to read the recommendation. Staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to enter into 2 agreements for packaged well sampling services, each for a term of 3 years, with 1, Wayne Perry Inc. in the amount of $184,488 plus a 10% contingency for a total not to exceed amount of $202,936.80, and 2 to Blaine Tech in the amount of $50,970 plus a 10% contingency for a total not to exceed amount of $56,670.
$67.
$67. Sorry about that. $56,067. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Director Williams,
Well, thank you.
I don't have any questions. We'll move this forward.
I concur.
Next item is the funding request for service connection, West Basin number 23 relocated.
Okay, and so here we have our senior, actually, are we having Orlando?
Yes.
He's online, right? So he'll be here joining us online to Orlando Rodriguez, our senior engineer, will present this item and provide staff recommendations. So thank you, Orlando.
Hi, Greg, and good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and members of the committee. Could everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. If you could turn, please turn to page 78 of the agenda packet for a copy of the staff report. So back in 2018, Golden State Water Company requested that Metropolitan Water District Service Connection, WB-23, be relocated from the Culver City feeder to the Sepulveda feeder. Per their procedures, MWD typically performs all items related to project implementation, including a study phase, preliminary and final design, procurement, construction, and startup, and lastly, the project closeout. In these scenarios, West Basin acts as an intermediary between both parties for items like invoicing and payment. For example, MWD invoices West Basin for project-related costs, and in return, West Basin invoices Golden State for payment of those costs. To date, West Basin has passed through payments to MWD from Golden State in the amount of $687,470. NWD is currently in the final design phase of the project itself. Recently, in December of 2021, Golden State requested that NWD prepare excavation plans as part of the construction bid package. Additionally, MWD has requested a deposit for additional internal review of the final design, specifications preparation, and bid phase activities. As a result, MWD is requesting an additional $103,000 deposit for these tasks. West Basin has received the funds for this additional deposit from Golden State, and therefore is ready to issue payment to NWD. So at this time, I would like to read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to have Metropolitan Water District develop excavation plans and permits, perform additional internal review of the final design, specifications preparation, and bid phase activities with a payment of $103,000 to Metropolitan Water District to be fully funded by Golden State Water Company. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Director Williams, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
I don't have any questions either. We'll move this item forward.
I concur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item is the approval of the project budget increase and authorization to issue requests for proposals for the Palo 30, for bids, I'm sorry, for the Palo 32 type of water pipeline project.
Okay, and so we have our engineering supervisor, Veronica Javia, who's here to provide the report and staff recommendations. And I think we have an item that I'll cover to start the conversation, correct? And so where are we in terms of the package page?
Page 86.
Page 86,
The presentation is on page 92.
92. Okay, thank you. All right, so I want to just start off, and so we had a really fantastic presentation of the PV lateral project. I think it was a couple E&O committees ago. And we had the pleasure of our public relations consultant, Trisha Morikawa, with us. And we talked about, you know, the totality of the project, where we are, where we're headed. And in that presentation, we talked about the next steps of advertising the project and, you know, concluded our presentation. And so with that, the committee had asked that we bring back to the board when we're ready to advertise, to seek approval to actually advertise the project. And so that's where we are today. But I'm starting this conversation today just to highlight the process that we have for project delivery and the touch points that we have along the way. And so this very first slide illustrates that. So we have projects that go through an initiation process, initial planning, and what I'm instituting here is a gate review process to check in with the project team, to see where we are in, you know, at these critical junctures between phases, to make sure that the direction of the project stays on track. And if there's any significant changes, that we have the opportunity to steer the direction in those critical junctures. And so, you know, between initial planning and procurement, going from final planning into the design, once we've gotten into the design at the 30% milestone, and in this case, at the 100% design where we are with PV lateral, before we go into construction bidding, having a chance to look at where we are in the project, what's the cost, what's the schedule, things of that nature. And then once we're into construction, checking back in with the project on getting ready for commissioning, and then ultimately closing out the project, making sure that everything has been completed as expected. And so each of these milestones provides the general manager with an opportunity to have hands-on interaction with the project team and to guide the go forward. With that, the board also has its own touch points on these projects, and that's the very next slide. And so with that, in the planning phase, if we have consultant awards that exceed a certain amount, Those awards typically would come before the board to authorize those. Once we're in the design phase, again, if we have consultant awards to do the design work for us, above a certain threshold, we would bring those to the board to review and approve as well. And then finally, once we get into the construction phase, we would bring the bid package back once we have the bids in to get an award for the board. And so what this committee has asked is to add a new touch point, which is the next slide, to authorize the project before it goes out to bid for construction. So with that being said, I just want to make sure that we understand all the opportunities for the board to have a hands-on approach. We're adding a new one as requested by this committee. And so that's what we will do for public works construction projects going forward. We're going to bring those to you for review before we advertise. I want to make sure that the full board is aware of that. We don't have your fellow board members here today. But the reason why I'm bringing this forward is to make sure that the full board is understanding of the process change that we're making. So with that said, I want to hand it off to Veronica to continue on with our discussion.
Question,
Yes,
but this will go to the full board for approval.
that's what you asked for. That's why we're here today.
Okay. Quick question. I know you probably have told us before, but there's so much that goes across these areas here that I have a tendency to lose some of it. So who or how will this project, the program management of the project, you know what I mean?
So who's the project manager?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Of the program, of the entire project. It's a project, but it has other elements. So who is the manager of the total project?
I believe Director Alvarez is ready to answer your question.
But when I was a public works guy,
It's Veronica. Veronica is our project.
you're the program manager, but we call you project manager.
Yeah, I'm the project manager, the planner.
So you're the go-to person.
He is the go-to person. That's exactly right. That's why she is presenting today.
That's all I wanted to know.
Yes, so, yes.
Congratulations, Veronica.
Yeah,
Great
so-
project.
You'll get all the slings and arrows.
Yeah, so yeah, as Greg mentioned, we have groups, teams. However, those teams do report to the project manager, where they work together, we bring a project together.
Well, I'm satisfied that you are the project manager and I have faith in the project. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do I continue on that?
Oh, you do?
Okay, thank you, sorry. Okay, good afternoon, directors. So yes, as Greg mentioned a minute ago, there are two components to this particular board memo. One, to bring the request for approval to advertise the pipeline fee package to go out for construction, as well as to bring up, one of the updates that we got on the cost estimates in regards to the pipeline project. As you guys are aware, this project in 2019 came to a little bit of a hurdle with the pump station having to be relocated to another location. And it was until 2021, a couple of years later, when the final location of the pump station was finally approved by City Council in the city of Torrance. And also on top of things, during that time, there was the COVID-19 restrictions, which basically changed also the ways that we used to practice review of plans with other jurisdictional entities. We typically used to submit, go in person, meet with people, and be able to have one-on-one conversations with them. And going to COVID-19, well, there was like a new learning curve for, I think, everybody, and which now we had to submit everything electronically. There was a queue, there was a accumulation of projects. So one of the things that you have seen on this project, like why are we at this level still, is that we're always waiting for a permit, like some agency to basically release those permits. And again, that's basically one of the, situations on the delay of this project. But moving forward with this, again, we have obtained, comments from jurisdictional entities, and we were able to put those into the big package. We have minor comments in the traffic control from the city of Torrance that we're confident to cover and be able to start the advertising of this project. So one of the requests that we're going to be making on this board meeting was basically approve the advertising. The other component to this is basically bringing, the updated cost that we know now in regards to the pipeline. Again, with the time being a major factor in this particular project, there are some cost increases that our design engineer, Kenneth Fleming, basically provided to us as part of the bid package, basically preparation, which basically back on page 86 on the docket, essentially the engineer's cost estimate for the construction of the pipeline portion basically is currently $7,239,880, which is a little bit higher than the originally estimated of $5,926,400. And some of these costs, again, those are due to the industry cost increases, and as well as some design changes that we had to go through the permitting and then inflation factors that we have been basically experiencing throughout these over the last year has been greater. Just to mention some of the changes that we had to go through was basically the directional drilling that we have to do for the to avoid eucalyptus trees on the Torrance Utility Road. So initially we were going to be building a pipeline open cut trench essentially, which is 4 to 5 feet deep. And having to do directional drilling basically requires a different type of material as well as sizes. We were going to be using PVC, 8-inch PVC pipe. Now we're using 10-inch HDPE pipe basically, because it has to be a bigger material. And it's also 10 inches for the same reason, for the thickness of that material. So basically that brings another component or element to that type of construction, as well as other items like, for example, the pump station. The original location of the pump station was located in a public area, basically. It was the cover was just dirt and mulch. And with us moving to a parking location, now we have to, one, bring the additional pipeline, the intake pipe, which is a 10-inch line, and an 8-inch discharge line, one to the pump station and one out of the pump station, for an additional distance of 400 feet each. And now instead of just going through dirt, now we have to basically go to parking and reconstruct some decorative rocks and all that other additional work, as well as reconstruct now a parking lot that originally was not part of the plans. So we are, there are also on that particular location of a pump station, there are other items like catch basins that right now are basically on ground, basically. And we need to basically, in order to build a facility there, we need to bring all those facilities, below ground. So essentially, that's been a lot of the permitting that we've been working with all the agencies, City of Torrance, Palos Verdes, LA County, to make sure that the design is meeting all the requirements that they need. So with this, essentially on table A that you can see on your package, page 88, basically there's a table that we'll do here is basically show what was the original previous estimate and what is the updated now. So we have basically updated the pipeline, the pump station, as well as the corresponding contingency on those columns, and have included also a column to show the difference. And basically the differential is $1,970,706. And basically we have been looking into how these funds are going to be, funded. So our proposal is basically that with this, additional increase of that 1.97 million. So basically and not using any additional external funding sources, that we will commit to that additional money from the reserve funding for the project to secure sufficient funds for the project's implementation. So on table B, you can also see, basically the current fundings that we have. And also you can see the updated information from previous to current and basically showing what is our additional, funding proportion to West Basin. Sorry. So with this, I can read the recommendation and I can take any questions. So the recommendation is that the board approve an additional $1,970,706 increase to the project budget for a new estimated total of $14,874,706, and authorize the general manager to issue a request for bid for RFP for the Palos Verdes Recycled Water Pipeline project only. Again, this is the authorization for the pipeline only. The pump station is still under review for permitting, so that will come up later on. And with this, I will take any questions.
And if I may, I'd like to maybe clarify my earlier remarks if I can.
Yes, absolutely.
So going back to the request for bid, we're bringing this forward. We'll continue to do that as a practice going forward, but I would reserve the discretion for smaller scale projects, urgent projects to go straight to bid so that we could bring those to the board in a faster fashion where I deem that to be necessary and in the district's best interest.
Depending on the size of the project and the urgency required, be appropriate.
Thank you.
Question concerning the parking lot. And I heard you say that you have to now cut across the. Some cities don't like to see cuts in their asphalt parking lots. They require you to pay a heck of a lot more asphalt. Are we seeing that here?
Yes.
Okay.
Plus also, not only that, so the pump station is in a corner, far away from, most of the traffic and parking. However, it takes 2.5 parking lots approximately. So we are also creating those parking lots that we are using basically. So we're taking them off and we're putting them also somewhere else. We are, like you said, reconstructing the parking lot.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No, that's-
I have a couple of questions. So the overall budget increase for the project from the last time we looked at it is $1.7 million. And thank you very much. This report, you presented a very good description of the increase in the funding sources. So that wanted to thank you, and that kind of presentation is very useful and answers a lot of questions. The project is going to be bid as two separate projects. I gather that from reading the staff report. There's the pipeline component and the pump station. The pipeline is what's going to go out to bid now. And the pump station design is 90% complete.
No, it's more than 90% complete. Essentially, we did receive comments on the 90%. When I say in October, basically, and all those comments are being incorporated into the pump station 100%. And there are some questions that we are discussing with jurisdictional entities and basically to make sure that we don't need to come back again or wait too long. Last time for the pump station, the review timing, it was about 4 months. We got already some portion of those plans approved, like electrical has been approved, but there's still like the grading that needs to be, approved, and like comments. There were minor comments on the structural component of it. So we are confident that we're gonna finalize this pretty soon. So as soon as that is complete, again, we will come back to the board with the process and basically bring you up to date on requests to, here's the plans, please approve.
I said, along those lines, and the clarification is, we're really approving authorization to go out to bid for the pipeline only today, and you just said you bring back the pump station.
Yeah, and that's what the recommendation also says.
The budget, increase is for both, though.
Yes, we looked at the, the pump station cost estimate and basically on table A, again, you can see like, okay, what is the updated cost estimate between the differential on the pump station and the pipeline? So we try to do our best to the information that we have on current costs and bring that information to the board to show you this is the information that we are aware of. So based on this, these are recommendations. And as you can see, there's also a component that we have included here, which is the contingency corresponding to each the pipeline and the pump station. But the budget authorization that we're asking is basically, yes, we're covered both of those. So, that's basically where we're at.
Will you be revisiting the costs for the pump station once you finalize the plans there?
Yes.
Okay, with that, I support that we move this forward.
I would too. Just one last question. So which one of our on-call engineers or who is going to be doing the construction management of project, and would it be all inclusive, including the pipeline and the pump station?
Yes. So we have already bring that item to the board. Carollo Engineers was awarded the project and basically kind of have them on hold right now, like, so we are ready for this moment, so they can, start doing some work. But essentially, yeah, it's Carollo Engineers. It's already on board, and yes, it's to maintain that continuity for both the pump station and the pipeline.
Thank you.
A point of clarification, Director. We went out and advertised that publicly. It didn't come from the on-call contract, okay, because of the dollar value. Okay, it just happens to be one of the contractors who also the district has had in the past on the on-call list.
Well, it sounds like that.
Okay, so with that, we're ready to move this forward.
I am. I concur with that.
So we're done with the action calendar, we're moving forward with the information calendar. I need to take a break, Director Williams, or maybe you can take care of item 6A.
Yes, I think we can handle that. It's informational.
It is informational.
Let's give us the information real quick while we get back.
Okay, I will be very quick on this, and this is my item. This is basically to inform the board that I will be exercising my authority under Administrative Code Section 5-1.110, exceptions to the procurement policy. And I intend to use this starting on December 1 for the purchase of chemical supplies. And that'll be through the remainder of the fiscal year, June 30th of next year. And the reason why I'm exercising this is to provide a more effective response and nimbleness in terms of procuring our chemical supplies for our operations. As we talked about earlier today, the market has been very volatile. We've seen that over the past 7 months that I've been here. And I think staff has indicated to the board, to this committee, that certain vendors are not necessarily accepting new clients. And some vendors are not able to actually commit to firm pricing for extended periods. So we had followed the directive of the committee and the board to do an early solicitation of certain chemical contracts because we saw that their vendors were not committing to their prices even within the confines of the contract that we have. And so we did that, and we're still seeing volatility among those same vendors now. And so what we want to do going forward under this authority is to provide more rapid engagement with the vendors. So it might be shorter duration contracts. I call them spot purchases. So we might do a spot purchase for a 3-month period, maybe it'll be a 2-month period, whatever we can get on the market to secure a reliable service for the best price possible. And then also to give us the flexibility of responding if a vendor should not perform. We've actually had that situation in, I think, 2 months ago, where one of our chemical vendors was not able to supply us. And so we had to find a different vendor immediately to provide that chemical. And so it was a critical purchase. And I authorized that critical purchase for that. Was it for a limited period, 1-week period, something of that nature?
2 deliveries.
Was it 2 deliveries for sulfuric acid? Thank you for the clarification. And so it's a very volatile market, and exercising my authority in this manner will help us be quicker in responding to the volatility and give us a more effective tool to be responsive.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so that takes us to our next information item. And that would be our recycle water fill station update. And we have Camille Castillo, our project manager, who's ready to provide the report out on how we're doing with our development of the water recycling fill station.
Item B.
This is item B, 6B. Yes,
Thank you, Greg.
thank you.
Been a little quicker, we could have gotten this one done while he was gone too.
So I will jump actually to packet page 148 to provide an update on what's been done since the last meeting. So if you can scroll. Thank you. So on this slide, you'll see these are images of the existing LEWP recycled water fill stations, the residential and commercial. So those are we're using those as template for our fill station. And I wanted to highlight the landscape and irrigation plan that we have on hand for the ECL Visitor Center, which we use to kind of do a preliminary review of the irrigation plans and see where we could propose a recycled water fill station. So if you go to the next page, 49, you'll see in the last month, we were able to perform a flow rate test to test out the verification of the irrigation system. So on the east side parking lot, you'll see that there are scheduled 40 PVC piping throughout the parking lot, and they range between 3/4 inch to 2 inches. And we were able to go out one day in October to test out the flow rate at this specific 1-inch quick coupler. And so from this flow rate test, we were able to determine about an average of 14.94 gallons per minute flow rate. So it is a feasible thing. And then the next slide, you will see an update on our schedule. So in this month as well, we've been focused on the procurement. So for the permitting portion of this recycled water fill station, we were able to release a task order request to our 6 on-call engineering consultants on October 24th. And then we did get proposals back on November 3rd, and that deadline was extended per a consultant request. And we were able to internally discuss and grant that request. And so we were able to receive 3 proposals for the permitting, and we were able to evaluate, and we decided to select Hazen and Sawyer. And so we are currently in the process of getting the contract signed and procured. And so that actual authorization date will be later on once we're able to obtain all the signatures. And so for the feasibility analysis and design, we also released a task order request on October 28th. And again, we were asked by a consultant to extend that deadline. And so we were able to extend it to November 10th, and we received 4 on-call proposals. And so we are in the process of evaluating those proposals right now. And so once we are able to select and get those contracts processed, we will be able to authorize that task order. So that currently is our update, and we will provide you more once we are able to move forward.
And I'll add that I appreciate the weekly updates that Camille has been preparing, and I've been sending those to the committee. And hopefully you find those to be useful and informative as well.
Okay, you have any questions on this, Director Williams? I have a couple of comments, I guess. By the way, how much are we gonna pay for the engineering study?
Sorry, what was?
What's the ballpark? You got a proposal from me?
So yeah, for the permitting, we granted 97,000,
How
roughly
much?
97,000 for the permitting portion of the project.
We're gonna pay $97,000 for this report?
Yes, so it is a supplemental engineering report as well as updating the Title 22 engineering report.
And I think that probably deserves a little bit more discussion. Because it is two very distinct, scopes of work in that one authorization. I think your sense of surprise that I'm sensing here, is that we would expect a amendment to use recycled water for the purpose of the fill station should not, require $97,000.
I've seen the report sent for much less.
Right, and so with that being said, the component of the 97,000 is much less. And if you could share what that
Yeah,
amount
so the
is.
supplemental engineering report itself is about 24,000. And so the Title 22 engineering report update is about 42,000.
Yeah, and so that update really goes to the topic of, we have a Title 22 report that simply just needs to be updated. And that's something that our Department of DDW, Department of Drinking Water.
Regional water quality.
Thank you, Regional Water Quality Control Board has expected of us for some time. And so this is an opportunity for us to tackle that task while also pursuing the amendment that the committee has asked for in terms of this project.
Thank you for that explanation, but one of the things I think that, at least my expectations was, when we suggested that this move forward back on September 2nd, that it be done relatively quickly and that it be done inexpensively. $24,000 for the engineering report seems on the high side, but that's fine. And then the modification to the system to install the actual filling station. So the idea was that this was not going to be a very expensive thing. It could be done relatively quickly, get the report done, submit it. BDW takes about a month to do it, and they send it off to the regional board, and you get your permit amendment. Today, we're finding out that we're doing that, but we're also doing a Title 22 report. And had I not asked the question, I would have left here with the impression that we're paying $94,000 for basically doing the recycle, or recycle filling station. Amendment. That's only 24,009. It would be best to really have that as two separate projects. I understand this will be done jointly. I don't have a problem with that, but in terms of a presentation, if this is what is spent for this portion, and by the way, we need to update our Title 22 engineering report. DDW's had some questions, et cetera. That's a separate item. And I find it frustrating that it's embedded in the recycling filling station. And had we not asked the question, we would never know the difference.
Okay, well,
I'd like to know, here's what we're spending for this, here's what we're spending for that. And these are two separate and distinct projects that do have, an overlapping Venn diagram. So it makes sense to have one firm do them at the same time.
okay. We certainly can come back with a more full discussion of the Title 22 permit update, if that would be what the committee would like us to do. I mean, to me, what you're saying makes sense. I mean, that is a distinct activity. And my expectation is that the one shorter one would not be waiting for the longer one, that we can get through DDW.
Next question.
Okay. And we have to work with our regulators to hopefully make that happen. And so that's the nexus, that's the Venn diagram overlap. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we can have a more full discussion around the update of our permit, and we can do that.
You can do the project without having updating your current permit, right?
That's what, we'll take some work with our regulators, and let's cross our fingers and hope they don't hold us for the other. They don't hold the one or the other. So
It-
let's cross our
if
fingers
the
on that one.
understanding is you're gonna do the other, there,
Well, we get any points for what we're trying to achieve here?
And I'm in sync with you on that note too, Director Williams. I mean, we are in probably an unprecedented drought in our recent memory.
and this is a feel-good project that they should be behind, and already we're 3 months since we should.
Since
since
September
get this
2nd,
done, and
right.
We thought, at least this board member thought by this time, we would have people showing up, filling up and taking recycled water so they can water their lawns, et cetera. Anyways,
Understood.
it just seems like there's, the sense of urgency isn't there.
Well, I think our staff is doing a great job of moving this forward as quickly as we can. And we are glad to have Hazen Sawyer win the authorization. And they're going to help us get this permit amendment done as quickly as they can as well. So I'm proud about the work that's being done here.
Any other questions? All right, so the next item up is
Thank you, Camille.
Good work.
Title 22 filter rehab and replacement project update and proposed next step.
Yes, so we have Orlando Rodriguez here to walk us through this particular project. And so similar to the solids handling project that was presented a couple of meetings ago, this would give the committee a full view of this, particular initiative and the business case that supports the recommendation that we have going forward. So please, Orlando.
All right, thank you, Greg. Hello again. If you, on page 151 of the agenda packet, you will find a copy of a staff report. And if you could now please turn to page 157 of the agenda packet for the presentation. So today we will start with the overview of the Title 22 recycled water process, followed by information on the project itself, including background and other items, then followed by a financial analysis, and finally the recommended next steps for the project. Now please turn to page 160 of the agenda packet. So here is a aerial of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility. Now, on the secondary effluent from Hyperion enters ECL from the northeast of the facility via the Hyperion pump station and force main. From there, it enters the pretreatment highway clarifiers, followed by the Title 22 filters. Now, filters 1 through 10 are adjacent to the highway clarifiers this here, while the
And
converted
if I could
filters.
draw your attention to the screen, he has animation that's going on. So if you're not seeing
Oh,
those.
Sorry.
Or maybe you, not sure if you're looking at that in your page or if you're looking at it on the screen, but Orlando is showing some animation here. So please continue.
Apologies. And then the converted filters 11 through 14 are north filters 1 through 10. Effluent from the filters enters the chlorine contact basins, which are downstream, followed by the product water storage tanks, where it then gets pumped into the distribution system, which is used for irrigation purposes, and is also the source water for each of the 3 satellite plants. Now, please turn to page 162 of the agenda packet. So here's a brief background on the filters. In 1995, as part of the initial phase 1 construction of ECL, filters 1 through 6 were constructed for the production of disinfected tertiary water, also known as Title 22 water, along with filters 11 through 14, which at the time served as pretreatment for the production of advanced treated water for the West Coast barrier. In 1987, as part of the phase 2 expansion, filters 7 through 10 were constructed and added to the existing filters 1 through 6 structure for additional disinfected tertiary treatment capacity. And in 2007, as part of the phase 4 ECL expansion, filters 11 through 14 were converted for even more treatment capacity for the production of disinfected tertiary water. Now please turn to page 163 of the agenda packet. So a key component of the filters are the under drain laterals that help optimize performance while providing uniform distribution during backwash. These laterals typically have a useful life of 20 years. So based on the commission date as seen here, the filters have been operating beyond the end of useful life by 5 to 7 years. Now, please turn to page 164 of the agenda packet. Here I will go over a brief timeline of past failures and repairs that were performed on the filters. In 2013, filter 8 began experiencing media loss due to an under drain failure. The filter was taken offline, media was removed, and rehab of the laterals was performed. And the filter was brought back online. In 2014, filter 2 experienced the same failure as filter 8. Therefore, the same repairs were performed to bring that filter back online. After a few years in 2017, filter 8 again, and now filter 9 began to experience media loss due to under drain failures. Now, because of the repeated failure of filter number 8, it was decided to perform a more extensive R&R, and thus in 2018, the filter 8 and 9 project was undertaken. In 2019, filter 2 again began experiencing media loss and was thus taken offline. In 2020, the filter 2 repair project was undertaken to restore the and bring filter 2 back online. And more recently in 2021, filter 6 began to experience media loss and now is offline as well. Two things that I want to note here is that in 2019, during a routine inspection, media was discovered inside the backwash Densidex by our operators. The removal of the media was performed at a cost of about $11,860. Also in 2020, during the chlorine contact basin R&R project, media was discovered inside the chlorine contact basins, and therefore an unforeseen $93,000 change order was executed to remove that media. So the reason I bring this up is that this is important since the Title 22 process is an interconnected one, and these failures can have impacts on other treatment components downstream as well. So as you can see, in-house spot repairs really, in regards to filter number 8, only really extended the useful life by 4 years. And for the case of filter number 2, really only extended the filter life to 5 years. So essentially not really a big increase in extent and useful life, and these were at an average cost of $102,000 per filter. Now please turn to page 151 of the agenda packet. So due to the repeated failures of filters 2 and 8, and at the time filter 9, it was decided to undertake a more comprehensive R&R project for the remaining 11 filters. So in 2020, an RFP for design services was initiated, and after a thorough evaluation process, the project was awarded to Carollo Engineers. Scope of services included an evaluation of R&R alternatives, a preparation of drawings and specifications, and a construction bid package. During the design phase, 4 technical memorandums were completed, and a recommended scope of work was developed to replace the under drain laterals, perform concrete repairs, and construct necessary safety improvements. The construction bid package was completed this past June. And now please turn to page 166 of the agenda packet. So as part of the 1997 phase 2 expansion, filters 7 through 10 were constructed using a portion of the existing filters 1 through 6 structure. In this case specifically, the north walls for filters 7 and 8 were originally designed as non-water bearing walls and are now carrying forces that were not originally planned. During a site walk, an unusually high amount of leaking cracks was noted on the exterior side of the north wall of filter 8, as you can see here on the top right. So therefore, staff requested that the consultant perform a structural analysis, which then the findings indicated that during a seismic event, this can result in the failure of the wall. And for these reasons, it is important to implement the recommended safety improvements in the form of some lateral bracing and added concrete beam depth that will increase the load capacity of the walls themselves. Now, please turn to page 167 of the agenda packet. So overall, the filters 1 through 10 have a design treatment capacity of 30 MGD, and filters 11 through 14 have a design capacity of 10 MGD, treatment capacity of 10 MGD, sorry. I apologize here in the slide, there is a typo. Today, as you can see on the picture to the left, filters 6, 8, and 9 are currently offline, as well as filters 11 through 14. In total, ECL currently has a firm treatment capacity of 18 MGD due to one filter always being in a backwash cycle. So with the recommended scope of work, by replacing the underdrain laterals, we can expect to limit the probability of any major future repairs by also extending the useful life of the filters by about 20 years. Now, please turn to page 168 of the agenda packet. So as part of the data gathering exercise, data was collected, SCADA data was collected from 2018 and 2019, as 2020 and 2021 are considered somewhat of anomaly years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we feel like 2018 and 2019 are a better representation of true demands. So during this time, the highest daily average flow was approximately 25 MGD in 2018 and 23 MGD in 2019. Also, peak max day demand was 30 MGD in 2018 and 28 MGD in 2019. So as you can see, in comparison to our current firm treatment capacity of 18 MGD, we are not able to meet these demands using Title 22 water as the source water. So in these cases, we therefore then supplement the Title 22 source water with potable water at the satellite plants. Now please turn to page 170 of the agenda packet. So as previously mentioned, Title 22 water is the source water for the satellite plants. Title 22 water enters the satellite plants and is refined further to produce either nitrified or boiler feed water. Typically, when the product water demand is greater than the Title 22 source water coming in, potable water is then supplemented and is used as makeup water to meet these demands. Unfortunately, this comes at a high cost to West Basin, as we have to then pay the full retail potable water rate of the local purveyor. So in this case, for the Chevron nitrification treatment plant, when we supplement with potable water, West Basin loses approximately $936 per acre foot in recycled water sales. So as shown for fiscal year 2021-2022, West Basin lost a total of $1,731,600 at CNTP due to the potable water supplement. And also, to put things in environmental perspective, the potable water supplement used here is the equivalent of 5,550 typical households usage per year, which is considered to be a family of 4. Now, please turn to page 171 of the agenda packet. So now at JMM, in this case, West Basin here lost a total of $744,768 due to the potable water supplement. And here, in this case, the potable water supplement uses the equivalent of about 2,586 typical households per year. Now, please turn to page 172 of the agenda packet. So at Torrance, there is a unique situation where the refinery pays for the potable water supplement when needed, as they actually own the potable water meters. So although this might not result in an economic impact to West Basin, we still consider the environmental impacts. So here, in this case, the potable water supplement used is the equivalent of about 2,772 typical household usage per year. Now, please turn to page 173 of the agenda packet. So here's a brief summary where the total potable water supplement almost accounted for 1/3 of the product water source used to produce either nitrified or boiler feed water. And in total, this resulted in about $2,476,368 in lost recycled water sales, along with using the equivalent of about almost 11,000 typical households per year. Please turn to page 174 of the agenda packet. So for consideration purposes, staff are proposing two alternatives. Alternative one would perform a comprehensive R&R on the remaining 11 filters outside of filters 2, 8, and 9. As previously shown in the timeline, filters are beginning to fail continuously, and thus this alternative would limit the probability of any major future repairs, while increasing reliability and customer service due to a decrease in service interruptions. Alternative one here is shown to have a total capital expenditure of $5,620,000. Alternative two would perform a comprehensive R&R on only the 5 offline filters, with spot repairs to be performed as needed on the other 6 remaining filters. Although alternative two does have a lower capital expenditure of $2,958,000, it does present a higher risk of potential customer interruptions and compliance due to the likely failure of those 6 remaining filters. Now, please turn to page 175 of the agenda packet. So for the purpose of comparison, we also develop a do-nothing approach. Now, the do-nothing approach assumes a no comprehensive R&R on any of the 11 filters, and thus we would be maintaining essentially the same amount of potable water supplement for the foreseeable future. So by implementing either alternative 1 or 2, it is understood that West Basin will be able to reduce the amount of potable water supplement by increasing the Title 22 treatment capacity. At this time, unfortunately, it is difficult to determine the exact amount of reduction we would achieve due to other factors that play a role in the potable water supplement, like the other treatment process improvements at the satellite plants. So therefore, in the case of alternative 1, if we were able to reduce potable water supplement, let's say by somewhere in the range of 25 to 75%, we can expect a return on investment between approximately 3 years to 7.5 years. Now, please turn to page 176 of the agenda packet. Noting the same considerations for alternative 2, if we are able to reduce potable water supplement by somewhere in the range of 25 to 75% again, we can expect a return on investment between approximately 2 years to 5 years. And as shown, the quicker return on investment is due to the lower initial capital expenditures. Now, please turn to page 177 of the agenda packet. So based on these other information presented here, staff recommends to immediately move forward with the safety improvements discussed, which will restore 3 MGD and production capacity. Furthermore, staff has recommended the implementation of alternative 1 that, as previously stated, increases the reliability of all the filters, decreases future customer interruptions, and limits the possibility of any major future repairs to the filters. Now, please turn to page 179 of the agenda packet. So in August of this year, we conducted a general manager review where we showcased the project. Here below are two paths for the components of the project moving forward. So for the safety improvement, staff will immediately move forward with a request for bids for construction. We anticipate award of the project next month with the anticipated project cost of approximately $150,000. After the project award, construction should approximately take about 2 months. We can expect a completion date around February or March of 2023. For the remaining filters on our project, staff will return next month to the E&O committee and to authorize the general manager to request bids for construction. We then anticipate award of the project to take place around February of 2023 with the project completion date of April of 2024. Now, please turn to page 180 of the agenda packet. So here you can see the estimated project expenditures if we were to move forward with alternative one. In terms of previously planned project expenditures, we previously anticipated a total of $5,217,000 for this current fiscal year, and just over $2,000 for the next fiscal year, 22-23. Now we have revised these projected capital expenditures and are currently anticipating a capital spend of $1,379,000 for this current fiscal year, and a spend of $3,840,000 for the next fiscal year. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Orlando. And I think just as a quick point of clarification on slide 180, the previously planned project expenditures, would that be also interpreted as what was approved in the budget for FY 22-23?
Yes.
Okay. And so we're basically saying that we would push out that cash flow because of where we are in the schedule at this point.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And then the second item I would bring up is that Orlando described safety improvements that are necessary because of cracks in the wall and the non-bearing walls. And so we've taken action to remove one of the two filter beds out of service to remove the seismic hazard that would place workers in jeopardy should we have an earthquake event and that wall experience a failure as calculated by the consultant who did the analysis for us. So we see that as kind of a fast track item that we need to kind of get on quickly, which was illustrated in the schedule as an immediate repair for the risks on that one, on those two basins. So those are my supplemental comments.
Thank you. Director Williams, do you have questions?
No.
In the presentation, we talked about right now that we're basically using portable water because we're not producing recycled water, Title 22 water. What exactly is shut down and why?
So filters 11 through 14 are shut down due to some earth scour manifold failures.
I'm sorry, which filter? What?
So the converted filters are currently offline due to the some air scour manifold failures. And
Maybe we could go to the slide number.
Sure.
What slide number is that?
This would be page 167 of the agenda packet. So filter, I'll start in order. So filter 6 right now is offline due to media loss. And per the previous experiences, we believe there's an underdrain failure at that filter. Filter 8, as Greg stated, is offline due to the safety concern. And filter 9 right now currently is offline due to a malfunctioning valve. Filters 11 through 14 are offline due to various failures, one including an air scour manifold failure and also a hydraulic constraint that we're looking to resolve with another project. But there, we did perform a condition assessment of filter 13. We took out the media and we do see some underdrain failures there as well. So with that, we can expect similar failures for the remaining converted filters 11, 12, and 14. And that's the reason why those are offline.
And I have to apologize, it's very, hearing you right now is very difficult to make out all the words.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
On filters 11 to 14, they're basically all offline. And that's 10 MGD capacity.
Yes.
Again, explain to me why they're offline. What is physically wrong with them? Is there, are we talking about valve replacements? What are you specifically holding these filters offline for?
There are air scour manifold failures at the filters. Could you hear me? Are you having trouble hearing me? Sorry, Director Alvarez.
Yeah, it's just, it's difficult to understand you for whatever the acoustics are.
Yeah, let me,
You said air scour.
yeah, the air scouring system, which is part of the backflow system, is offline. The system actually failed. Okay, and in addition to that, there is a hydraulic constraint with 11 and 14, which doesn't allow the filters to be used to its full capacity. That is being being corrected by the booster pump station that's under construction now. So once the booster pump station is put online, filters 11 through 14 can be utilized after they've been repaired. And the major repair is the air scouring system, as well as putting the new media back into the filter beds that it was removed from.
When we did a condition assessment on 13 as well that revealed some underdrain issues.
Yeah, there was we emptied out number 13 so we could take a good look and have a good assessment of what really needed to be done and what didn't need to be done. And so we took the media out of 13, so we exposed the underdrains and we concluded that the underdrains needed to be replaced. Okay, and knowing that 11, 12, 13, and 14 was constructed at the same time, what we observed in 13, we felt was a good representation of the other filters in that train number 2, as well as the repairs that needed to be done to the air manifold system, which was hanging and disrepair.
How long have these been offline? 11 to 14.
Unfortunately, Director Alvarez, it is hard to say. When speaking with operators, I know they've been offline for a number of years now.
So 11 and 14 have been offline for a long time.
Yes.
11 and 13 have been offline for a number of years because of failed air scour manifolds, the structural failure. 12 and 14 have been offline mainly due to the hydraulic constraints, and depending on the season and demand, we haven't been utilizing those basins.
So 11 and 13 have been offline for a longer period of time than 11 and then 12 and 14.
For similar amount period, because We were operating the 12 and 14 on and off time period because depending on the demands, we were using those 12 and 14. But since COVID hit, demand has been reduced, so there haven't been a need. And we were working on the booster pump stations. So awaiting for that project to be done, then we can possibly look into bringing those back on.
So without filters 11 and 14, the capacity of the NC Little plant is at 30 MGD. Assuming everything else is working?
Assuming all 14 filters or assuming just 12 filters?
Assuming that filters 1 through 10 are operating in a normal cycle, the capacity of the plant is 30 MGD.
Not including the,
27 firm, one filter is always in backwash.
that's just for Title 22 service, not the Chevron and the barrier.
So yes, N plus one then.
So part of it,
So 1 through 10, you always have one in backwash. So what Wendell mentioned is 27 firm at any given time.
so that's for Title 22 only. And then for the advanced treatment water, which would be the barrier and Chevron, how much are we producing there?
This, sorry, go ahead.
Design capacity for barrier is 17.5. And for Chevron is 5.5, like 2.2 for high pressure and 1.7 for low pressure.
Okay, so on the advanced treatment, are we producing that at full capacity?
Currently, we are for Chevron boiler feeds. For barrier, currently we're at 10.4 at this moment. This is the allowable targeted recycled water rates given by the county at this moment.
So the reason we're doing that is because the county doesn't want to take more advanced treatment
yes,
water, or
recycled
because we have issues with the processes at the plant.
Oh, currently we're allowed to inject 10.4 recycled water, 10.4 mg recycled water into the barrier system. And if we were to push higher than that, we are working on making sure all the compressors are working, and we replaced the phase 4 MF filters, but now phase 5 filter is showing signs that we need to replace them sooner than later. So, but so we sustainably we are 10.4 at max for now, but we are working on getting the equipment healthy enough. That includes the dewatering facility, because that will impact amount of solids or backwash water that we can treat.
All right, so with respect to the barriers and the treatment processes that feed the barriers, you're at 10.4, you can comfortably do that. If you went up to the 17.5, you could not comfortably do that.
Where we are today with the microfiltration system for phase 2 and phase 3 off, we don't see ourselves being able to get 17.5. And so those are the microfiltrations. Those are separate processes than these filters. So I just want to make that clarification. The barrier production and the Chevron production are related because the waste that comes in from those systems goes through these filters, it gets recycled. So they're related indirectly. The capacity for these filters are for the Title 22 that go as feed water for the other satellite plants.
You're getting to my point. Do these other filters affect the MFRO process or the barriers and Chevron?
They do. They do. indirect, correct, the waste,
Because the backwash from the MF system goes back to the EQ
To the
basin,
filters.
which makes it back to the filters and then pretreatment and then through the filters. And then depending the percentage of recycled water, I mean, this recycled flow goes back, it would affect the performance of the filters ultimately. And it will also impact the amount of solids being handled. So
Okay,
they're all interconnected.
no, I get that. I'm just trying to get you guys to clarify it so that there's no misunderstanding. So for the past year, I thought I had seen numbers that we were actually producing more for the barrier than 10.4. But
Past year, no.
no,
No, because we were basically offline due to the Hyperion upset. We're offline from
maybe the year before.
the year before, yes.
At one time, didn't you almost hit 15 for the barrier?
That was when we still have phase 2 and 3 online and all the MF were healthy, newly replaced, I replace that word. So
that
those
was-
MF membranes were last replaced for phase 5 were 2013. I don't know, 2018, 2017, 18. That's when we were last replaced, when we have the Paul expansion project. So they are 4 years into the useful life. And due to the amount of beating that they have seen through the Hyperion upset, so we are seeing more and more membranes being breakage and fibers and needing more pinnings, and we need to replace those. But going back to Barkev's point, in order for us to have the 17.5 sustainable barrier production, we'll need the phase 2 and 3 that MF flow back, because right now the Chevron boiler feed is borrowing the barrier capacity. If that makes sense to you.
So Director Alvarez, if I may add, so the 15 is what we hit, the maximum that we hit over the past few years. We got steady on 12, and then the event happened at Hyperion, went down to 0. We brought it back up to 4 when everything cleared up, and now we're at 10.
Recently, we approved buying some MF membranes. And some of these are gonna go to address
So
the
the
issue.
phase 4 membranes phase 4, that was approved back in, I don't know, October. And
Yeah,
then,
the last couple of months.
so we have replaced all of the phase 4. Those are the submersible MF membranes. So they have been gone into the phase 4 system already. What I'm talking about is the phase 5. Those are the pressurized Paul membranes. Those have been about four years old.
So those need to be replaced now.
Those needs to be replaced soon, and we're trying to get right now, the only approved membranes to go into that system is the Paul microfiltration membranes. We are trying to do a pre-qualifications. We are aware of there may be at least 2 other MF similar to the Paul membranes that can go into the system. So at the beginning, we're planning to do a pilot and do pre-qualification on those alternative membranes. So yes, those phase 5 membrane, we will want to replace them sooner than the 5 years.
If I could ask you to bring back a discussion on the barrier production. Trying to flush out the information that you guys just kind of presented. I think that the public in general hears a lot that we're producing recycled water. We're not using a lot of imported water, et cetera. When that's really not the case, it would be best to have a much better understanding of where we really are at, why we're there. So that's one presentation that I would like to bring brought back either next month or the following month, whenever you can fit that in. Okay,
Got it.
then on the Title 22 water. the production capacity there is theoretically, it's about 35 MGD.
The tent design.
With the
When
14,
people read our literature, we say that this plant, some people have been told that this plant produces 90 MGD, believe it or not, by members of this staff, not current members, but other members of the staff. And I have heard that, and if I just correct them and say, no, we don't produce anywhere near 90 MGD.
Design has.
But on the Title 22, it's about 35 MGD. Right or wrong?
Due
I
to
guess I'm
the-
asking the question.
due to the hydraulic constraint currently, if all the filters are online, yes. But with the boosted pump station project to be online, then we'll have the full 40, well,
35.
35. But because-
So
With the downtime, backwash.
Right,
So the filters were intended, with all 14 were intended at 40 MGD. Minus one, you take one offline, so 35 is, 37 and a half.
Yeah.
37 and a half. And that's assuming the project that's in construction right now, the pump station is online, because without that pump station, that 10 goes to 2.5 because of the hydraulic constraints. So now you're talking about somewhere between 37 and a half to 30 when the is what we have without the pump station. With the pump station, 37 and a half. So you were saying around 35, that's in the ballpark. If all the filters are in, the rehabbed, the under drains are in good conditions and don't keep on, that's around the number that you're talking about, correct?
so that's assuming 1 through 14, but we know we're down on 11 to 14, so that takes that offline. And the remaining filters, 1 through 10, so that production capacity is 30 MGD. One's gonna be offline all the time, so it's probably about 27 or 25.
27.
27.
27, okay. So 27, but we're not producing at 27, right?
No, today we're around 16 to 17 MGD. It's winter, the demands are low, and we are supplementing potable.
Okay, so we're supplementing Paul. And the reason for that is we've taken a couple of those filters offline.
We're supplementing potable for, there's the filters, but it's more water quality related.
Just water quality, we're supplementing at the satellite partially. If the refinery demands will go up, yes, that was part of the reason, because right now, the filter conditions. But the other main reason contribute to the potable water supplementation is due to the filters, the MF filters at the satellites. Those are failing as well. As one of the CIP projects that we can put on the book is to replace the Torrance MF and the new CMF at JMM. We should be able to reduce or eliminate the potable water.
Okay, but right now, we have a couple of filters offline,
We have,
7
7,
and 8.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 7 and 8.
7.
we have 7 filters offline. If you're not looking at the converted, we have another 3 in the first end that are offline.
So we have 7 and 6 plus 1, right?
And the reason they're offline right now is because if you go to package page 179, we have the safety improvement.
So 8 is offline because of the safety improvements. 9,
Sorry,
safety improvements
okay, the safety improvements
are the overstressed wall that that Orlando touched on. The wall that would require the bracing and the beam to
We have a copy of the.
fortify it structurally.
and that wall's overstressed for what reason?
The wall was built as part of phase 1. It was not built structurally to handle loads from water. So when phase two was built, and a basin was built right against that wall. And so that wall was carrying capacity of load from the water itself, acting as a basin. When phase two was built, there was no structural improvements to that wall at the time. So that's the main driver for that. The structural analysis that we did showed that without a seismic event, that the load that the wall is carrying is 36% higher than its available capacity. With a seismic event, it could go up to 83% higher.
In the report that you guys provided, most of it walls are below their demand capacity ratio. So the only place where you really are failing is under the seismic load condition.
The seismic load condition brings the loading over capacity to 83%.
Right.
But even without a seismic load condition, it's still higher than its capacity by 36%.
Well, if you look at one of the tables in the report that you sent, for the north wall of filter 8, under non-seismic conditions, the DCR is less than 1.
It's actually 1.36 for shear. It's less than 1 for flexure. Next page.
Right. But in general, everything is less than 1.
The other ones are less than 1, yeah.
So if you put that filter back in service, what would be the increased capacity?
3 MGD.
At least that's 3 MGD that we don't have to buy of imported water.
Correct.
If you do the risk evaluation here, we're really talking about seismic loading and probability of a seismic event happening of the magnitude that they're considering for that to fail is small. And if a seismic event of that nature occurred, I think we would all be more concerned about a lot of other things than losing the capacity at the plant, because we're going to lose capacity there throughout.
An additional concern is the condition of the wall. So the analysis showed under the current construction that it lacked the capacity. However, the wall itself has cracks in the wall. So you can't really even determine what the true capacity would be under any kind of event because the concrete itself has already failed.
Window, there are cracks in the wall and water leaks through them, but that, until that basin was taken out of service, that was not failing. And the structural analysis, they made it very conservative, and the assumptions made in terms of the conditions indicate that still there's sufficient structural strength. My point is that you can repair the cracks for the water that's going to leak through it, but I would suggest that we put those basins back in service. The probability of an earthquake event of the nature that is going to really create any significant catastrophic failure is very small. And that should not be the primary concern. The primary concern should be, is it going to fail? It's not going to fail structurally if it wasn't for a seismic event. Is there some leakage? Yes, concrete does crack. And that can be repaired. It's not that big of a repair, but in the meantime, we should be trying to produce as much water as possible and not using imported water, given the drought situation, et cetera. And given the fact that I think we'll proudly tell the public that we are a leader in recycling water, and we've invested a significant amount of money in doing so. So to the extent that we can safely operate this, and we can, short of an earthquake. And I like to always say when I had to look at CEQA stuff, yeah, you can always assume that there's gonna be an earthquake and a 747 hitting that dam at the same time. And it will fail, catastrophic. So but the probability and the risk is not significant, and we are losing, or we're importing at least 3 MGD from what I just heard. And we may be importing even more if we could just put all those filters back in service, or importing less if we could put all those filters back in service. And repairing the cracks is fine. I'm not quite sure that we're talking about investing as much money as looking at here. You know, I keep coming back to the fact that in 4 more years, or 3 years after this year, we're not gonna have water there, and we probably will not be operating the Ipsy Little plant. So we have to be very careful on how, and that we do what has to be done to maximize production of recycled water, but not go overboard and make investments that are gonna be 10 and 20 years in their life, and we may not be operating that plant. And until we know better, we need to be very, very conscientious about that.
Mr. Chair, is this an information item?
I know, I just had questions that, so, 2 things, if we can bring back just the issue of the MFRO processes and that I talked about earlier. And then I think we've done, but take into consideration if you can safely put that stuff back and reduce the import of water costs. Okay, with that, it already is after 6, and I know, Director Williams, that you said keep this meeting short, and I tried,
Yeah.
but I did have questions. Would you like to just pass on the other 3 information items?
Your information, will they keep?
The,
Mr. General Manager,
What's the question now?
will the information items that are left, if we don't deal with them today, will they rot? Will they keep?
Well, I think item D was regarding the project labor agreement that Director Gray asked for us to bring back. I don't believe she's here
She's
today,
not here, so.
so we could potentially reserve that for the full board meeting on the 28th. If the full board is would like to have that.
I think that is an important item, and that should be
Yeah.
back to the full.
You asked about it, so yes.
Okay, and so I would ask under item E, if perhaps Wendell can indicate whether there's anything critical that the committee needs to hear urgently.
There's nothing critical in the monthly update. It mentions 2 new projects, and one of them is the strengthening of the wall on 8. And the other is another chlorine tank that is leaking at the Carson's facility.
Or are we going to be asking for an action?
These are information items.
Information only.
I would suggest that we push it.
Okay, and if I may ask Uzi if there's anything in the operations update that's critical for the committee to hear?
No, but I get point of clarification as the operations manager. Are we to disregard the safety memo and are we asked to bring the filtrate back online then? Okay. And
So that's a good question, Uzi. But before we answer that question, is there anything in the operations update that?
no, but we just, because it was related, but not at all, not.
Okay, so Director Alvarez, provided a clear opinion on, the relative risk of the seismic event and this wall, and the recommendation that we return the filter bed back into service. So as the fellow committee member here,
I don't have the level of experience that Director Alvarez has when it comes to seismic kind of stuff. So I would let the full board address that.
Okay, so perhaps we can carry this item for further discussion with the full board.
I think it's gonna be a long report unless they get very focused. Really,
But
Director Williams, the basin's been in service for a long time.
I know,
And if it fails, it will only fail under a really big earthquake.
Okay.
And so why are we buying as much imported water when we can be producing water?
well, I think the other directors need to hear that.
So just for clarification, you're talking about 6C, D, E, and F. You'd like that to be on the information calendar at the board meeting or next month at the committee? Do you want to revisit it?
It's going to be an action item. It should be on the upcoming board meeting. But I understand it was just an informational item, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So this point I have C, D, E, and F moved to the board as info items.
So I think item D, Director Gray had asked to have a presentation on the project labor agreement. So we could potentially have that as an info item for the full board, at the end of the month.
Okay, why don't we, the ones that we're not acting on, and it sounds like the rest of the board members need to hear it, we should take it forward to the upcoming board meeting as an information item.
Okay,
And
so
if we want to talk about it, somebody could pull it off and discuss it.
So it's just gonna be an information item and it may or may not get discussed.
Right, depends on if you want to pull it off.
I think item A would be a receive and file. We've already talked about it here. Item B would be a receive and file. We've already talked about it here. Item C, there's a particular recommendation that we want to have a conversation around with the full board. So maybe that's an information item, not a receive and file.
Right. Director Alvarez has some good points, but I think the full board needs to hear.
So we'll have that as an info item, not a receive and file.
Correct.
And then item D is the one that Director Gray asked for. So that'll be an info item, not a receive and file.
Correct.
And then the monthly report for engineering, the monthly report for operations. Both managers have indicated that there isn't anything urgently needing to be reported. So you have those printed reports,
Receive the funds.
receive and file. Okay, that's clear. Okay, thank you. So that pretty much concludes our information calendar.
Thank you. I think with that, we don't, director's comments. Do you have any comments, Director Williams? I don't either. Then, the next item up would be adjournment. This meeting is.
Before. Next scheduled meeting date, December 14th. It just so happens that there is a Colorado River Users Association conference and several board members plan to attend, as well as the general manager and the assistant general manager plan to attend. And so it may be.
I would, suggest, we can either cancel the December meeting if Director Williams.
Altogether, yeah.
Feel that's the case, I'm fine with that, or find another date. What's your preference? Cancel?
Cancel it.
Or for cancel?
Try to, because there's too much stuff in.
So we'll meet, and then our next regular meeting will be in January,
Next regular meeting will be in January.
and the December meeting is canceled.
I mean,
Uh,
we have action items to bring that are time critical.
Or December.
Oh, we have chemical. We'll be coming to you for some.
But we just gave
Yep.
didn't the general manager just make a presentation that he had the authority to do that?
Yeah,
So I'm good with that, and.
Gotta get where he lives.
Look how efficient that is.
all right. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Orlando.